Welcome to Weekend Ag Matters from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Join us for an in-depth look at Iowa agriculture. Here's your host, Mark Magnuson.
Hello and welcome into Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Mark Magnuson. In today's episode, Riley Smith speaks with the president of Stine Seeds, Myron Stine. Dustin Hoffmann is joined by Iowa Renewable Fuels Association Executive Director Monte, and Russ provides his faith-based segment. Let's turn our attention now to this week's news headlines. The Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show is in Nashville, Tennessee this week, and the Iowa Cattlemen's Association is in attendance to represent Iowa's producers. Brian Whaley is the CEO of the Iowa Cattlemen's Association and says that Iowa's producers and ICA staff are in Nashville and using their voices to help shape the policy and future of the cattle industry in the United States.
We're here to, number one, represent our members from Iowa in policy conversations that are happening across the country. And we're engaged on a regular basis, as was mentioned by some of the NCBA staff, which we appreciate that they recognize that. And then really, how do we influence based on what's happening in Iowa right now and the current trends within the cattle industry, and how can we influence some of those decisions to make sure that Iowa people are represented in the policy that's going to be moved forward from the work that's happening here today.
Whaley says that Iowa is one of few states that features all aspects of the cattle industry.
You got to remember, Iowa, we cover from the calf sector all the way up to the fed cattle market, right? And so we're one of those unique states that really covers that whole gamut and all the sectors.
He adds that ICA is working to help overhaul the Conservation Reserve Program by modernizing the policy.
We had a policy. We brought forward several amendments to the current CRP policy, and if nothing else, through that process, we really, I think, woke some people up on how old that policy really was and how it really needed to be updated. And what we brought forward actually probably could have been a standalone resolution, but in the end, we worked with the committee, worked with the chairs to then pull that policy back and say, hey, let's redo that whole CRP policy moving forward, and then have something, a summer business meeting that we can really get a lot of people to sign on.
Producer voices are important, and they can yield results. Ethan Lane, the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, tells the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network at NCBA's CattleCon in Nashville that Iowa producers are numerous and active at the conference.
You know, I'm always amazed. I get to come to Iowa once or twice a year. I always love the hospitality, but I always love the fact that Iowa producers are in every conversation. I mean, they show up, they have their notebooks in hand, they've talked through what they want to do. They're certainly in every meeting in this building. Iowa cattlemen are everywhere here, engaged. They're at the microphone, they're asking questions, they're putting policy forward, and they're driving the agenda on a bunch of issues.
New World screwworm is one of the primary top-level issues for producers in the southern United States, and while New World screwworm has been isolated to Mexico thus far, producers in this country are very concerned about the spread of the parasite and the potential of NWS crossing the border. Despite the distance from Iowa, Lane says that Iowa producers need to continue to follow the spread of screwworm flies north and their potential impact on the United States.
I think what we see anytime there are extraordinary circumstances in the U.S. cattle and beef supply chain is that cattle move differently, and choices are made on where to send calves and where things can be processed that are going to meet value-added program specifications or whatever else, and that is always going to come through Iowa in one way or another. There are too many high-quality cattle being produced in the state of Iowa for that to not be a player in those conversations, whether that just be price implications from that, right? Or differences in supply of cattle or where they're coming from. But certainly, I mean, I buy beef from a farmer in Virginia, and what he does in harvest and process there goes to Iowa.
Dustin Balsley is founder and chief operating officer of Performance Livestock Analytics, and he tells Iowa Ag Radio about a digital tool that helps catalog data every day for feedlot producers.
Yeah, we're an Iowa-based company. Our flagship product is Performance Beef. It's a platform which feedlot producers are feeding with an iPad every single day. It allows us to help the producers capture every pound of feed that gets loaded, every pound of feed that gets delivered into each bunk. And so we're capturing nutritional data, health data, and financial information. And what the beauty of our system is, we work really well with trusted advisors with the producers. As we know, producers are really busy all year round, and so they need to surround themselves with nutritionists, veterinarians, financial advisors, and so we allow producers to have the option to share their information or their data or their system with a nutritionist, a veterinarian. They can help build protocols or rations and things like that to make their life a little bit simpler.
That is all the time we have for headlines this week. Let's turn things over now to Russ Parker and his faith-based Food for Thought segment here on Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, where Iowa Ag matters.
Last week, I took a little R&R and went ice fishing. I know, for most folks, heading south through the sun and sand sounds a lot better. But hey, 20 inches of ice, minus 12-degree temperatures, and about 20 pounds of warm clothes sounds pretty good too, doesn't it? Well, truth be told, we had a great time, and there's nothing like staring down a 5-inch hole in the ice, eye glued to the neck-straining Vexlar screen, and you hear an occasional "daggone it," followed by the always hopeful "got one," and another fish flops into the bucket. And for those of us wired that way, there's just nothing better. But you've got to agree, there are fishing fools among us, and I'm one of them. Fishing fools will go to just about any length to catch a fish, even if it means drilling holes through solid water to entice one to bite. And really, ever since the beginning of time, since ice fishing was first invented and that very first hole was drilled, the sport hasn't changed all that much. Sure, the tools have evolved. We've traded hand augers for gas and battery-powered drills, and simple bobbers for sophisticated electronics and modern gear, but the basics, they're still the same. Present the bait on a hook, entice the fish to bite, and then somehow, hopefully, get it back up through that hole in the ice. And all of that has to come together at just the right time, which is exactly why they call it fishing and not catching. And that got me to thinking, when Jesus called his disciples, he didn't complicate the process. He met them where they were, many of them fishermen, and said something simple but life-changing. "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." The process of leading people to Christ really hasn't changed much either. The tools might look different, the methods have evolved, but the basics remain the same. Relationships matter. Patience matters. Faithfulness in Jesus matters. And it still happens one person at a time. We don't force it. We don't rush it. We show up. We share the hope we carry. We trust God with the timing. If you want to catch fish, you've got to go fishing. And sometimes the invitation is right, and sometimes the timing isn't. Sometimes we cast a line and do all the things right, but we come up empty for a little while. But the fact of the matter is, whether we're fishing through a hole in the ice or sharing faith with someone we care about, patience is essential. We stay faithful to the process, trust the one that knows where the fish are, and always be in a mindset of hoping to catch at least one more. Food for thought, I hope. This is Russ Parker. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, Russ. Up next, we will have Riley Smith's conversation with the president of Stine Seeds, Myron Stine. That's coming up next here on Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.
Farmers, stay on top of your local market with Basis Matters from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Every day, we bring you the latest corn and soybean cash prices from inland grain elevators and river terminals across Iowa. Get the prices you need to make the best-selling decisions, no matter where you are in the state. Basis Matters connects you to the numbers that matter most to your farm. Tune in every weekday only on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network and make informed grain marketing decisions with Basis Matters.
Welcome back to Weekend Ag Matters. Here's Riley Smith.
The Iowa Ag Expo took place earlier this week in downtown Des Moines, and it was another busy year of many of the nation's top ag companies visiting to show off their latest innovations, visit with farmers, and also do a good amount of networking. I visited with Stine Seed President Myron Stine to discuss the latest that is happening with them, specifically when it comes to their Yield Maximizer program and how that can help producers identify small changes that can cause some significant yield gains. A lot of farmers here already, and as they come by and visit with everybody at the Stine Seed booth, what are they excited for looking into 2026?
Well, so Riley, we're a company, we're focused on breeding innovation, family values, and farmer results. Those are our pillars for a company. And one key thing is we're working on a program that's called the Yield Maximizer program. And what we do with that program is our field reps in our agronomy department collaborate together with our growers, and they really do a good job of helping that grower understand what products to plant where, how to plant those, And then we also come out in the spring and we make sure we do stand counts to assure that their product came up properly and that they're set up for to have a good growing season. So that's our key thing, and it's we've been doing it we did it a little bit last year. We're expanding the program quite a bit. We're getting more growers onto it, and it's something our company wants to focus on right now.
And of course, with that yield maximizer, I appreciate you bringing up the collaboration with the agronomy team. It feels like farmers nowadays, there's just even more of a focus of having that agronomic access kind of in your pocket. I mean, you have your phone, people are reaching out text all the time. To have a program that facilitates that connection is obviously a huge benefit because, let's take out that step in there and let's just make that connection a natural part of the partnership already, right?
Absolutely. A number of our field reps are pretty good agronomists themselves, but we've beefed up our agronomy program, and so they all work together very, very well. And we have found that's what a grower wants. I mean, they don't just want to buy seed and just have a transactional situation. They want us to help them understand their farm, understand the products, understand where to plant the products, how to plant the products, and then furthermore, did they do it right? I mean, we feel as a company, it's our responsibility to make sure that the grower has good germ and good stand, because without that, they're starting the year off wrong.
And we're going to be starting that season here pretty soon before we know it. I know Punxsutawney Phil yesterday said 6 more weeks of winter, but we're already looking at what to do as early as possible for that planting season. With that yield maximizer program you mentioned as well, of kind of looking at specific areas of the field. What do you need here? What variety works better here? Is there a different area of the farm that might want a different variety? There's a lot less of, I would say, kind of the blanket variety selection where it's like, yeah, I'll just go with this, run with that on the farm this year. There's a lot more specificity, it feels like, when it comes to what to plant and where to plant it.
Well, yeah, and I feel like our company puts out a portfolio that's very versatile, but and in some cases, a grower could probably take a number of our soybean lines, for instance, and put them just about anywhere, and they'll do okay. But we also feel like we have enough data that we can help them maybe make it 3 or 4% better. And in some cases, that's the grower's profit. So we think that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. And we know, too, that having that information be digestible for the grower is very important. And having that, like you mentioned again, having that beefed up agronomy side of things really can help make it to where that farmer can look at that data and go, I see exactly how I can make that change in my farm.
Absolutely. Our research group, we collect so much data. Like they run like 6 million drone flights a year to gather data on our individual varieties that are out there. And so we really do have a lot of data right out of the gate when we introduce a new product to help our customers place that product right and maximize the value of that product on the farm.
One last thing, Myron, I know you mentioned the family values as well. It's not every day that you see a seed company that is still run by the same family who started it. And I know that's kind of a big example right there of those family values.
Oh, yeah. My father started the company. He's still highly involved. I have a brother and 2 sisters also involved. I have some nieces and nephews that are involved. And so, yeah, we're truly a family company, and it's family members making a lot of the decisions that are out there. And we like that, and we have found there are customers, they want that. They want that family feel.
Myron, lots of great information today for anyone who wants to stay up to date with Stine Seed and they can't make it to the show. How can they do that?
They can go to our website, stineseed.com, and there's a plethora of information there. It's a very good website.
All right, Myron, thanks again for your time as always, and enjoy the rest of the show this year.
Thank you.
That again was Stine Seed President Myron Stine at the Iowa Ag Expo in Des Moines. That's it for segment 2 of this week's show. Coming up next, Dustin Hoffmann will wrap up the program as he has comments from Iowa Renewable Fuels Association Executive Director Monte Shaw as he spoke at the Iowa Renewable Fuels Summit. This is Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Tune in to Ag Matters PM, your daily dose of crucial information affecting Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Every evening, our dedicated broadcast team brings you the latest news straight from the field and from our rural communities. From market updates to expert insights, we cover it all with a down-to-earth perspective that truly captures the essence of the heartland. New episodes are posted every day of the work week to the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network YouTube channel and our website at iowaagnet.com.
Welcome back to Weekend Ag Matters. Here's your host, Dustin Hoffmann.
Welcome back to Weekend Ag Matters. I'm Dustin Hoffmann, and earlier this week we did have the Iowa Renewable Fuel Summit, and during that time, Iowa Renewable Fuels Association Executive Director Monte Shaw gave what could be likened to a state of the biofuels situation in Iowa for the year. Of course, a lot of that centered on E15 and year-round access. Here's an excerpt from some of the comments he made during the event.
So looking back on 25, or actually let's rewind all the way to December of 24, we see several areas of policy excitement that ultimately stagnated into frustration. There was a year-end funding bill in December of 2024 that included provisions to remove the outdated and unjustified restrictions on year-round E15 sales. But one tweet from Elon Musk put that proposal on the ash heap of history. Just 2 weeks ago, another E15 compromise, another ray of hope for farmers, disappeared into disappointment of congressional action. And I fear if we don't see Congress act on E15 in the month of February, right now, I don't think we're going to see congressional action for years to come. And here closer to home, we just honored the governor. On January 1, 2026, it marked the compliance deadline for her groundbreaking E15 access standard. It was her vision and her leadership that passed that bill. It would not have happened without her, and there were many supporters and leaders in the legislature, but she was the one that pushed that through. And that was about 3.5 years ago. Now, when the governor signed that bill 3.5 years ago, there were only a little over 200 stations in Iowa reporting sales of E15. You can see on the chart up there. Today, there are over 1,100 stations offering the option of E15 to their consumers. Nearly every Iowan has the choice to buy E15. Sometimes it's branded as unleaded 88. They have the choice to push that button on the pump. And what happens for consumers if they push that button? Well, they get more octane for their engine, and they usually save somewhere around 15 cents a gallon for their wallet. And I know she's left, but I think we owe one more round of applause to Governor Reynolds for that accomplishment. We really cannot minimize this success. Nebraska has already passed a similar measure. Minnesota is working on one right now. Even California recently passed a law to authorize year-round E15 at the state level. And IRFA now is sending them our story here, of our successes here, to help guide their implementation out there. I don't know. I hope they listen. I don't know. It's California. But the impact has been clear. While we won't get official state numbers on 2025 E15 sales until April, the preliminary data suggests that our E15 sales last year were going to be close to 500 million gallons here in the state of Iowa alone. And that is the year before. The E15 standard actually went into effect. And that's not even going to be the biggest impact. The biggest impact of the E15 access standard here will not be the gallons sold in Iowa. Rather, the real impact will be to show retailers from coast to coast that if you offer it, they will come. Given the choice, E15 will be the standard fuel in the United States. The question is not if, but when. Now, just last week, President Trump came to Iowa. Some of you might have noticed that. Excuse me. I needed an applause line in here somewhere so I can get a drink of water. You guys are a tough crowd. Who just kept their job? I joke to staff, if they don't applaud, I fire them, but it's not true. So just last week, President Trump came to Iowa. I would note that I have no idea how much time I have left, so I'm just going to keep talking. So we came to Iowa, and IRFA teamed up with Iowa Corn. And we wanted to ensure that E15 was front and center. So we released an open letter to the president calling for his continued support for E15. Because it was on this very stage in January of 2016 that President Trump first announced his support for removing the regulatory roadblocks that were encumbering higher blends of ethanol. That was President Trump right here on this stage in 2016. That was the first time he said it. So we wanted to say thank you for your support. But we needed to keep it going. So now some in D.C. were counseling us to be cautious. Don't push too hard. But you know what? You never reap a harvest that goes unplanted. And so what did we do? Iowa Corn and IRFA took out a full-page ad in the Des Moines Register thanking President Trump for his support of E15 and noting that we needed congressional action. I must also caution you, though, that does not mean anything is guaranteed. I am not counting my E15 chickens just yet. But I do think with the President's remarks, and if those words turn into action D.C., I think our odds of E15 success just went up many-fold. If he pushes Congress to act, I think that we can... So let me start over here. I think if President Trump takes those words, goes back to D.C., and pushes this thing through in February, I think it's actually going to be the most singular achievement for farmers that President Trump has achieved. Now, before you start throwing out other things at me, there are many other important issues. There are tax credits. There are RFS blending levels. There is trade. Those are all very important. I'm not minimizing those. My point is those are all ongoing issues. They were before Trump. They'll be after Trump. E15 represents the one shining light at the end of a very dark tunnel for farmers. And so that's why I think that if pushing it through would make President Trump the godfather of E15. And I believe farmers would be talking about that for a long, long time. So I want to end today by drawing a parallel to where I started. A generation ago, RFA, where I worked at the time, came together and with the American Petroleum Institute, and they put aside years of fighting, and they forged the great RFS compromise in the aftermath of 9/11. That went on to be passed by Congress in 2005. Now, a generation later, those leaders, maybe you remember Bob Dineen or Red Cavaney, they've gone on to other endeavors. But new leaders have taken their place. And once again, corn growers, ethanol supporters have forged a compromise with API. This time to allow year-round E15 and to provide some RFS exemption reform that the oil refiners want. It was not easy. Both sides had to bend. But here, a generation after the first big ethanol oil compromise, we have found common ground again. So I sincerely hope that Congress takes this opportunity and adopts this compromise. After 10 years of bickering, let's settle year-round E15 once and for all. So I want to end today by drawing a parallel to where I started. A generation ago, RFA, where I worked at the time, came together and with the American Petroleum Institute, and they put aside years of fighting, and they forged the great RFS compromise in the aftermath of 9/11. That went on to be passed by Congress in 2005. Now, a generation later, those leaders, maybe you remember Bob Dineen or Red Cavaney, they've gone on to other endeavors. But new leaders have taken their place. And once again, corn growers, ethanol supporters have forged a compromise with API. This time to allow year-round E15 and to provide some RFS exemption reform that the oil refiners want. It was not easy. Both sides had to bend. But here, a generation after the first big ethanol oil compromise, we have found common ground again. So I sincerely hope that Congress takes this opportunity and adopts this compromise. After 10 years of bickering, let's settle year-round E15 once and for all. But in closing, I do want to take a moment to make one thing crystal clear. If President Trump fails, for whatever reason, to compel Congress to act, the fight for E15 will continue. But I don't confuse myself with the oratory of, say, Winston Churchill. But it's his words that are echoing in my head as I consider our next steps if Congress doesn't act. We want Congress to act, but if they don't act during February. Faced with defeat in France and the retreat of the troops during the narrow escape, quite frankly, of British troops from France during the Dunkirk evacuation, Churchill did not sue for peace. He vowed, there's a quote up here on the screen, he vowed that Britain would go on to the end. We shall fight on the seas and the oceans. We shall fight in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We will never surrender. Now, it is beyond my power, as you just saw, to give the life to those words as he did. But that is the spirit that I feel in our quest for E15. I cannot summon forth such stirring phrases to rally us forward in our decade-long quest for nationwide E15. But I can today make crystal clear that if we face defeat in Congress, we will not sue for peace. We will go on. It may be inauspicious to fight in Congress for some time, but rather, if a solution cannot be found there, then today I propose that we take our fight to the beaches of California. We will fight in the Badlands of North Dakota. We will fight in the cornfields of Kansas, and we will fight in the rolling hills of Indiana and Michigan. Yes, our fight will return to the states, where 7 Midwest governors showed us a path forward to E15 year-round. Now, it is not our preferred path forward, but it may be our only path forward for now. And if so, we will accept that challenge, because I know that you out there and our efforts with IRFA, together, when it comes to E15, we will never surrender.
That again was Iowa Renewable Fuels Association Executive Director Monte Shaw here on Weekend Ag Matters, and that's going to wrap up today's show. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com. For Russ Parker, Mark Magnuson, and Riley Smith, we thank you for listening. This has been Weekend Ag Matters. We'll see you next week.